Hi, welcome back to the channel. Unfortunately, today I have to take a pause on Magic Gaming in Brea, or at least a part of it that I usually provide in the channel. And I want to talk about something that happened recently. I wasn't there for it, so what I want to do is I want to go over a little bit about what I've heard, a little bit about my biases in the situation, any issues like that. I want to talk a little bit about uh, what each side is essentially their sides here, or what's being said, and then I want to give you my opinion. I don't think it'll be a shock to you, but I also want to explain why I have the opinion I have. So what I'm referring to is that there was an old school championship at MTG Vegas, and apparently it was run by Channel Fireball. It had, if I remember correctly, something like 150 players, over 100 players. Okay, so a gigantic format. It's old school. I don't know how many folks showed up with Moxes and Lotuses and stuff, dual lands, but I'm guessing just trying to figure out the value of the decks that were in play here. You're if there's 100 people there, you're probably talking something like the average deck is worth, geez, I don't even know, $1,000, much more than that, 10,000, $100,000. It's actually possible in old school for a deck to be worth that much. So with 100 players there, you're talking about at 10 grand each. Let's just say 10 grand, which is super low ball, right? That's at least $1 million in cards that were being slung around at this event, right? So not everybody has a full set of Moxes and stuff. So we'll just lowball it. All right, so what I'm getting at is you've got an event with 100 players, the biggest old school event that I know of, supposedly the championship, run by Channel Fireball, with at least $1 million in cards out on the table. From my understanding, the entry fee was something like $50. So this is a serious event. And what happened at the event? Well, Brian Weissman entered the event playing a modern version of his old school deck. So I say a modern version because you can't use current cards, but it's modern in the sense that the deck list was not the deck list that he played in 1995 or 96 or 2000, right? He's been working on this deck for a while now, as I understand it. And so he's been trying to tune it using the card pool of Old School. So if you don't know, Old School has a slightly different card pool from what I played back in the day when I played the deck. When I played, you could have 4 mana drains. When I played, Mishra's Factories could not block and then tap to make themselves 3/3s that would deal damage. You could only do that to keep them alive, but then they wouldn't deal damage, unlike today. When I played, you didn't die for having 0 life, so you could tap a City of Brass until the end of the phase. So you could tap a City of Brass during your upkeep to drop to 0 life with a Mirror Universe in play, and then you could sacrifice the Mirror Universe at 0 life, exchanging life with your opponent, who also didn't die, until you said, okay, I'm going to exit my untap or my upkeep. And then if they could healing salve themselves or something to gain life as an instant, then they could stay in the game. And if they couldn't, then they would die once you exited the phase. Now, of course, you die as soon as you hit 0. There's no delay for phase, right? So a lot of rules are different. I think the card recall is now, which used to be restricted, is not restricted in some formats. I don't know if it was for this event. So a lot of things are different, and what you got ultimately is a different card pool. The main, most important change, the most important changes are probably the ones I listed, mainly because it really changes the flavor of the game. I don't actually like the changes that much, but it is what it is, and that's what they were playing. I don't want to get sidetracked by that too much. Anyway, so Brian showed up, and anytime Brian plays in an old school event, I think it's something of an event, simply because he's the guy that invented the deck. And the deck in every old school event is always the elephant in the room. It's a well-known elephant as far as everyone knows that somebody will be playing the deck, probably multiple players, and everyone knows that it's the deck to beat if you can, right? So you'll have things like almost mono red decks playing with disenchants and like red elemental blast sometimes in the main, stuff like that. Whatever. Anyway, so what I'm getting at though is that Brian shows up to this event and my understanding of his mentality. This is the third Old School event he's played in within the last couple of years. He didn't do great in the first two, getting back into the game and adjusting to the changes, but he just kept tuning and tuning. So for this one, he was almost certain he knew what the list was that he was going to play, and sat down to play, and they didn't have deck registration. Now, this is apparently not, from what I'm reading, this is apparently not uncommon for small Old School events, but typically things that you do at small events like a Friday Night Magic, there's usually a lot of things that happen in an environment like that that don't scale up very well. So you get a small group of Old School players at some shop in, Norway or something, and they're playing one way, but when you scale up to a full tournament that you're running, typically you're going to require deck registration, right? So deck registration is a requirement that is as Old School itself. We figured this out 20 plus years ago, that without deck registration you have a combination of misunderstandings and problems, and today was to be no exception. So what happened? So trying to stay on fact though, is that on the factual side of things, Brian started playing, and as much as we know is that there are there's 60 cards in his deck, 14 cards in his sideboard plus one, okay? The 14 cards aren't in question, and the 60 cards in his deck aren't in question. But what happened is there was a photo op midway through the tournament that Brian participated in, and in the photo op, he had a configuration in his sideboard which had one card different. So he had changed one of the cards in his deck for the photo op, is what it looks like. When he played in the tournament, he had his original configuration that he started the tournament with. So, or at least that's what it looks like. However, because people at home saw the discrepancy between the card, which was a Circle Protection Red, and in the actual deck list in the tournament. In round 3, he actually played a mono red player, and he played a Circle of Protection Red against mono red. Usually, if you're running COP red, one copy is sufficient to win a game, but he drew the second copy and said, well, whatever, I'm going to play that too. I don't know why. Maybe because Chaos Orb is in the format, and maybe that's a way red could kill it. I'm not exactly sure, but he played a second cop red, which, according to him, was in his deck list from round 1 through round 9. Okay, so, but the fact is, he did play the second cop red in that game. A photo was taken of it, and it was of the board state at one point with 2 cop reds. And then fast forward to much later when they did the photo op. They do the photo op up like a few rounds later as he's approaching the finals, and he does the photo op, but he doesn't do the photo op with the cop red in his photo op picture. So he and then according to him, the reason he didn't include it was because and most likely as a result of that game where he had 2 cop reds just sitting there, the second one's doing nothing, he didn't like having 2. So he wanted to do the photo op and sort of take a picture of the optimal deck list, right? So this is what he says. Now, at home, people saw the photo op and they presumed that that was his deck list. And the reason they did that was because in events, when they're run properly by a tournament organizer, and not a small, like, little scrubby event, but a large event like this one, there's a deck list. And in Old School, typically if you don't do a deck list on paper, you do, before the tournament starts, you take a picture of everyone's deck. You take a photo of everyone's deck. The reason for the photo is that in Old School, you're not allowed to use reprints of cards. Like, you can't use a 6th edition COP red. You have to use like a beta or unlimited COP red. So that's where they want the photo. Of course, you could just write the deck list down, and if you're sitting next to an opponent and they whip out a 6th edition COP red, you just judge and then you call the judge over. Now, let's imagine that happened. The judge would give you a slap on the wrist and ask you if you had an unlimited one. You'd go, oh yeah, sorry, I put the wrong one in my deck because it looks pretty or whatever. You'd take it out, you'd put the new one in, and you'd carry on. They'd check your deck list, make sure that it matches, right? And that's it, right? So whether or not they even, I don't know, they'd probably give you like a warning of some sort or whatever. But that would be it in that case. Okay, so people at home saw his photo and they assumed that this was the photo op, and they assumed, okay, well, this is the photo that was taken before the tournament started, in which he was registering his deck, and based on this photo, he should have he should not have a second cop red. And by deduction, and from other game states and other games, they said, well, the only other card it could be is this Dust to Dust, or maybe they asked him. I'm not exactly sure. But at some point, everyone realized, like, the Dust to Dust was the card. I mean, in fact, I think he even said Dust to Dust was the card in the photo op that the cop red, like, should have been, right? That's the card that it should have been before he started the tournament. He wished that he had put Dust to Dust in his deck and not a second cop red. And for the photo op, he wanted to display the deck as it should be. And it's sort of like, here's the photo that I want to be remembered by. I don't want to be remembered by, my mistake of playing with 2 cop reds throughout this event, right? So after the photo op, he took the Dust to Dust out, put the cop red back in his deck, and finished the tournament, right? So when I heard this, I was like, well, okay, wait a minute. What if he started the tournament with, what if that's not the order of things? What if he started the tournament with the Dust to Dust in his deck, and then he switched it out to cop red for that one opponent, and they put it back to Dust, and then in the photo op, he forgot to switch it out to cop red real quick to trick people or whatever, and then he had to switch it out to go back. Basically, like, I'm thinking, like, what happens if he started with Dust to Dust, right? And then he just switched in the cop red in the middle of the event, and then switched it out right after the opponent, right? So I said, well, the only way we can know, like, if that's what happened, is that all we need is a single player at any point, or observer, to have seen him with a Dust to Dust in the tournament. So then I started looking around. So I've been scouring the internet for like 4 days. Did anybody ever, like, did one of his opponents say, yeah, he beat me with that Dust to Dust, and then the round 3, I think it was, opponent said, yeah, he beat me with 2 cop reds, and you go, uh-oh, now we've got a problem. Well, absolutely not. Nobody actually has ever said they never said he had a Dust to Dust in his hand. He never had one in his graveyard. They never saw him draw one. He never had one in his deck, and they never saw one in his sideboard. The only time Dust to Dust ever appears is in the photo op. Okay, so that's consistent with, the, chain of events as described by Brian himself, right? So, again, full disclosure, no, Brian's a friend of mine. Hopefully everybody watching this knows this. He's one of my best friends, so I'm completely biased here, right? I'm totally biased towards Brian. I want to try to be unbiased, but I don't think that's humanly possible, because I have conflicting values of integrity here. On one side, I've got integrity and honor, and on the other hand, I have, like, loyalty to my friend. So in the interest of honor, I'm trying to maintain my integrity by expressing my bias to you. But, you know, and that bias is that I have a loyalty to my friend. So, I I want to believe him, right? I want to believe him. So I'm searching the internet. I'm looking to see, is there a dust to dust? And I'm like, I really want to believe my friend. My default position is innocent until proven guilty for anyone, friend or not. And my default position with Brian after 25 years of him being the man that he is and seeing the way that he interacts with people, um, the fact that he's spent the early part and actually from the beginning all the way till now always complaining both publicly and privately to me about cheaters. We've had many conversations about how much we hate that crap because of how it hurts the format, how it hurts um, people's view of winners, because of how if a cheater does cheat, it encourages other people to cheat because if the other guy's cheating, how and I'm fighting fair, I might lose. So so then it creates like an escalation of arms and stuff that we don't want, right? One of the reasons we love to play online has typically been because despite all of its flaws and all the garbage you got to deal with in Magic Online, you can't cheat, and it's such a relief to just prove you have skill at this game in a in format where no one can claim you've cheated and where you can actually prove that you have skill in this game, right? You're not cherry picking your games. I do my live videos. Brian does his videos. I guarantee you that what you see is what you get with him. Okay, but that's my bias, right? So in order to try to balance that, I'm looking at, okay, well, let me take a look at this Reddit thread here that talks about what are some of the opinions. Like, I'm just going to kind of look at the top opinions and see if they have merit on both sides, right? So here's, I will say this, at some point early in the event, so the chain of events is that Brian goes on to win the tournament, sweeps it, and I know, and then gets his trophy, gets carried around the room. He privately, well, he expressed to me that it was a hell of a good feeling. You're right. It was an amazing feeling. It was something that he had worked hard on, and he had had multiple losses previously, in the last couple of years, but he just kept working on it because he wanted to live up to his reputation, right? Which I completely understand, right? Especially in my line of work, I think, a man's reputation, a person's reputation is very important, um, which is why I was shocked that anyone would even think that he would risk his rep. If he's willing to lose twice over the last couple of years, he'd be willing to lose a third time. He'd be willing to lose as many times as it took so he could win without tainting his reputation, right? So I just, anyway, but let's see what happens. So some people have been looking at this. So Brian actually says the tournament needs an untainted champion, and he returns the trophy and the prize. And he doesn't say, oh, because I cheated. He thought about it for a while, and he decides to return the trophy because, well, I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. He didn't really tell me. And then my best guess is, well, I mean, because we talked about so many things. Honestly, actually, even if you did tell me, I don't remember what his reasoning was. But I mean, just thinking about it, like I know the guy doesn't like controversy. He tries to take the most peaceful approach. Like he doesn't like conflict. So I would have assumed that his thinking would be something along the lines of, let's handle this at the lowest level. Let's handle it quietly. I'll return the trophy. I'll explain the situation, and we'll straighten it out. And then, they can hand me the trophy back or whatever. That's my assumption here, just based on how I know him. I've never seen. He's a guy that just doesn't get. He gets angry like we all do, but he has he has total control over that. I tend to blow my top, and he is just very level-headed. But sometimes that's because he's holding it in. And so I don't know, when this happened, I think he was holding it a lot. I think it hurt him a lot. And he was, I don't know how clear his thinking was. And the problem for me was I was out of town. So I was actually camping. And I found out about all this like way after the fact. I wish I could have been the clear-headed person in the room, if he could have texted or called me or something. But I was literally camping with my 5-year-old. So I didn't have cell service. And I could have I could have like maybe assisted in I don't know, at least talking him through it so that he could figure out what his next course of action was without being, so stressed and emotional, right? But at any rate, let's take a look at some of these posts. Very high rated, Ursat's Cats, 156 points, says, I hate cheaters as much as the next person, but why are people taking his decision to return the trophy as some kind of proof that he deliberately cheated? Like, if that was maybe his first response, but it wasn't. He didn't come to that decision for several hours. I mean, isn't that what an innocent yet reasonable person would do? I know I didn't cheat, so I'm going to stand my ground. Well, I guess it looks bad. Now that I've talked to people, this does look bad. I may have violated rule I didn't even consider to be an actual rule. In this case, the person's talking about, because what's happening is people are saying, well, once you take a picture of the deck, that becomes your deck list. And of course, I told you how that happened, how it played out in real time, right? So people are trying to retroactively like jump in a time machine and say, okay, you took a picture in round, what was it, like 5 or whatever? Okay, well, we're going to retroactively apply that and make that your deck list, but we're not going to hold anyone of the other 150 people in this tournament to that standard. Just you, and just because we want to, get the pitchforks out, right? So anyway, this person says, rather than draw this out, I'll put the needs of the community ahead of myself. Like, do we really want people accused of cheating to have no recourse other than deny to the ends of the earth? Is there no room for someone to say, I maintain my innocence, but I recognize it's a terrible look, and I have no way of proving my win was legitimate, so I'll close the matter by withdrawing my win voluntarily. See, here's the thing that I love what this person's saying, but holy smokes, I have a problem with this. That's not the way we operate, right? And we don't say prove a negative, right? You don't demand that somebody say prove you didn't do this thing, right? I'm in Utah, right? And recently there was a crime in the newspaper. There was a kid. Some kid got kidnapped, right? So nobody came up to me and said, hey, prove you didn't kidnap that person, right? That's not how we operate. Nobody came up to anybody and said that. Not me, not anyone, because it's just not the way things work. You don't go up to somebody and say, I think you did it, now prove you didn't. What you do is you say, I have evidence which appears to prove you did it. Now you have an opportunity to explain why you didn't. However, it's the evidence first, and you still assume innocence, right? You let the evidence, then you bring it before a jury, and then they look at it and they decide, well, I don't know if that's enough for me to get over, because innocent until proven guilty is a big hurdle to get over, and I don't feel like you really proved it here. I mean, it could have happened that way, but it might not have. So I gotta say innocent here. I can't say guilty, right? That's the way that things work in court. That's supposed to be they work in your heart, right? Because we don't want to live in a society where we pull the trigger and shoot you, and then we demand the evidence that proves, whether or not that was correct, right? So, like, it's just not the way that we operate. Anyway, so this person's saying that he has to prove his innocence, and I'm like, no, that's the default position. You have to prove his guilt. And that's why I started, actually, I'm going to continue this post in a second, but that's why I started my hunt, because I was hunting for his guilt. I believe he's innocent. My heart believes he's innocent. Mentally, I believe he's innocent. But I'm trying to be impartial. It's so hard. So I started hunting for his guilt anyway. I said, well, let me find the opponent that says he played that dust to dust. And that opponent doesn't exist. Nobody's made that claim. Nobody's made that. It's been 4 days. It's never come up. I'm saying this now. Somebody's going to go, oh, yeah, I saw it, because they watch my video or something, right? But, I mean, for real, right? Like, that would have been, somebody would easily have said yes. And CFB, Channel Fireball, the organizers of this event, who did not take deck lists down, they actually called everyone, the rest of the top 8, and I think like one other person back, or maybe it was just the rest of the top 8, had them replay and then awarded the tournament to whoever was second place, basically not Brian, right? They awarded the trophy. So that would have been any opportunity for those people who just got together, who felt like they were cheated, right? Because surely they must have felt like they were cheated if they were called back to replay a top 8 in a format in which there's a claim of cheating. That would have been the time where they would have said, oh yeah, he cheated. I know for sure because, he played dust to dust against me. Oh, we played COP red against me, that kind of thing, right? Didn't happen. Never happened, right? So it's really weird that people think him having two cop reds is the problem. It's not. If you start the tournament with two cop reds, you finish the tournament with two cop reds, and you have two cop reds in every single match, there is no problem. If you go and take a photo op at some point in the middle of that, hell, he could have whipped out his Elves deck. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what he takes a picture of. It has nothing to do with the event. But there's also another problem here, and I want to get to it. But let me go ahead and read the rest of this. So he's saying, this player's saying, I'm definitely not saying he didn't cheat, nor am I saying he definitely did, but I followed cases of cheating that drag on forever because of people's inability to simply do the right thing. And let me tell you, those situations are crap for everyone but the onlookers. So why are people presenting this as proof he cheated? Just to keep up the troll and stoke the fire more? I don't think that's good for the community. The sooner this can be put to bed, the better. I get the whole technically my photo didn't have to match my deck thing isn't a good look, nor is I want to hide my super secret tech of COP red, but voluntarily withdrawing the win, assuming it was voluntary, is like the least guilty thing about the situation, something we should be discouraging. So Brian he doesn't have a Twitter account, but he created one because of this event, right? He's got like 7 posts. They're all related to this. And he did the same thing a lot of people do when they get on Twitter for the first time. He stuck his foot in his mouth. Especially people who are highly emotional and don't really have calm, cool, collected counseling. But yeah, he stuck his foot in his mouth. And he was like, well, something, deck tech, something. I don't really know. But that's my understanding here. The Twitter mob, well, that's a whole different story. But I don't have a Twitter account, or if I do, it as no posts. I think I created a Twitter account so I could follow something, and then it was totally uninteresting to me, and I forgot about it. And like years later, I found out that somebody had hacked my account, and I had like 2,000 followers with Arabic names. And I was following like 2,000 people. They all had these like weird Arabic names, and I went in and I changed my password and I unfollowed everybody, so I followed nobody, and I think I have no posts. If I do have posts, they weren't me doing it. Anyway, that's my experience with Twitter. But as far as Brian goes, I told him, I was like, dude, what do you do? Just stay off of that. It's a totally toxic environment. And he was like, yeah, I realize that now. And, all right. Anyway, so that's the end of that one. This person's premise is that there's people trying to excoriate him for returning the trophy and trying to handle it in a calm, basically way. And he's saying like, hey, that's what we want to happen, right? So let's see here. The next post here, I'm trying to do the posts that don't have where they're not primarily just quoting someone else, right? So this person, Bubba Wowza, says, CFB is running away with this, CFB Channel Fireball, right? Regardless if Weissman cheated or not, they could have easily prevented this by just having deck lists. It's not like they take up too much space or anything. And don't give me the old school player never uses deck list crap. That's just lazy. People are cheating, right? That's human nature. It's being highlighted a lot lately. If you go to a tournament without deck lists and just trust people to play fair, well, you're a good person, but it's on you. There's always people that will break the gentleman's code, especially when there's an actual prize to win. I see a lot of hate towards Weissman, but CFB made this all possible. And then somebody else pointed out that in serious old school events like NoobCon and stuff, the event that runs unofficially at North America and EW, there's a championship. The pictures are the deck lists and have to be submitted to the organizer prior to round 1, right? That's how a deck list works. You take the deck list before round 1. So CFB totally screwed up here, and I want to talk about that as well. I'll get to it, and hopefully I'm not boring you guys, but this is just, I've been thinking about it for 4 days, and I'm kind of brain dumping here, and I just want to at least express my position based on this. Or at least what I see, right? So again, good on CFB for taking action. A+ decision. They could have done nothing. Next guy says, would have been better if they just had people provide deck lists at the start. Not really that hard. Yeah, exactly. In reference to the recent Old School Champs controversy, someone just posted third place at the online Pauper qualifiers with a completely uncastable COP red in their burn deck. I followed the link, and fourth place or fifth place. So it was like fourth place. There we go. Look at this. Fourth place lands are 2 Forgotten Caves, 15 Mountains, all bunch of mono red trash, right? Or, well, blast. Mono red, it's not trash at all, actually. It's insane damage. Pauper deck, fourth place, 17 lands, all of it mono producing red, sideboard 1 COP red. So, hilariously, whether or not you believe it, yes, people can make mistakes. They really can. And I want to show one other example of that, and that is a much more famous example, actually. Here we go. For those of you who are not familiar, okay, so Tom Champagne, anyway, he played a white weenie deck in 1996. I would like to pronounce it correctly, but I'm unsure as to the pronunciation, okay? In 1996, and I still remember this because this was a big deal to me, reading the deck list and looking at, who won in the duelist, right? So he played mono white, okay? So Order of Lightburr, White Shield, War Beast, Savannah Lions, Sarah Angels, Armageddon Balance, all kinds of good stuff. Lots of fun stuff. Disenchant, a bunch of other stuff. Wait a minute, what? Sleight of Mind. So his plan was to, give Order of Lightburr, for example, protection from green or whatever. 4 Swords, an Outpost, Mishra's Factory. How did he do it? Well, he didn't do it with his Outpost, 4 Factories, 15 Plains, 4 Strip Mines. He didn't do it with the missing island for land tax. He didn't do it with actually what was really missing. So here's the story. Third World Magic Championship held at Wizards. And by the way, check out his sideboard. More Sleight of Mind. Not a mistake, right? Third World was held at Wizards headquarters in Seattle. It was the first Worlds we played at a Pro Tour. 125 players, roughly the same amount as this event. Competed, featured a booster draft, standard, Funny thing was that it contained a Sleight of Mind with no way to cast it. He misregistered his deck, forgetting the Adakar Waste, which is a land that produces blue, right? DCI rules forced him to fill out the empty slots with basic planes, so the Sleight of Mind was stranded. It didn't matter. He went on to win anyway, and then he was commemorated. So what was the penalty for misregistering Tom Champagne's deck? I'm just going to say Champagne, I guess. Tom Champagne's deck. So what was the penalty for him for misregistering the deck? Now this is a tournament with roughly the same number of people, roughly the same card pool actually. Very similar. But it's a very high level event, right? This is a world championship event, okay? And this has a deck registration, and the guy's misregistered, right? So what's the penalty for misregistering his deck? So where basically, in other words, his deck list doesn't match his deck. They said, well, you're going to have to make your deck match the deck list. So we're going to look at the registration sheet, and we're going to change your deck to what that registration sheet says. So we're also going to give you a game loss. A game loss, that's the penalty. 1 game loss. He didn't lose a tournament. He didn't return the trophy. And the only thing he had to do was take out the Adakar Waste that he did not write, that he didn't have in his deck list, and put basic planes in to substitute for them. So in the event that Channel Fireball had done their due diligence and actually done their job and registered decks correctly, if Brian had had a misregistered deck, so if he had taken that picture that he took like at the photo op, in round whatever it was, the middle of the event, if he'd taken that picture prior to round 1 and they said, this is your deck registration, and Brian's like, yeah, cool. And then he sits down, it's a picture with a dust to dust, right? And then he plays the tournament and he's got a COP red. Do you know what the penalty is? They take the COP red out, they put dust to dust in the deck, and they tell him you get 1 game loss. That's the penalty. That's the penalty. It isn't a tournament loss. So this whole thing is totally insane, right? However, of course, nobody's saying that he misregistered his deck because there was no deck registration. Or people are trying to retroactively like retcon in implied deck registration because, I don't know. But it doesn't exist. So they're trying to create a deck registration process post facto, after the fact, and then put it in their time machine and then penalize them. They're not applying the correct penalty. The correct penalty, if that were true, if that were the case, right? If that deck registration happened in round one, the correct penalty is a game loss and forcing him to use dust to dust, the card he actually wanted to use, right? That's the card he wanted. That photo op was the photo that he wanted to put out to the general public as this is the premier, this is the optimal version of the deck. So he wanted to use dust to dust, but couldn't, right? So he would have been forced to use the card he wanted to use. He would have got a game loss, sure. But then forced to use the card he wanted to use, and then the tournament would have continued. He would have got his 9-0 and he would have won, just like he did. So, however, that's actually not what happened. What actually happened was there was no deck registration. He had 2 COP reds for the entire event. He never used the dust to dust despite how badly he wanted to, right? And he finished the event with his deck integrity in check. The exact same deck he started with was the deck he finished with. When he took the COP red out and swapped it into the dust to dust for the photo op, he then swapped it back. Like the next opponent, he didn't like forget and leave the dust to dust in, forget, right? Like a cheater's move. He didn't do that. He swapped it back to the original configuration, the suboptimal configuration, the one he didn't want to use. All right, so anyway, let's see. This guy says, not posting deck lists is so arrogant. Like your deck tech is a format that hasn't changed. It's so spicy you have to hide it from everyone. Who do you think you are that you shouldn't have to post your deck list? And then this guy says, if they don't require you to post your deck list, I'd say I think I'm an accurate person. And another guy says, well, for one, he's probably the most influential control player to ever play Magic, so much that his deck is known as the deck. So yeah, I would say maybe Brian's deck tech, like his tech, if he wants to share it or if he doesn't want to share it, is pretty much his prerogative in any event without deck lists. Although in this day and age of internet and cameras, like it's pretty hard to hide your deck tech. But you try, and more importantly, it's irrelevant, right? It's irrelevant. Nobody's like, ooh, he didn't want his deck list to get out. Get him! That's what? That's a crime? Okay, no, it's not. All right, which actually, in reality, he actually was trying to, and it's also completely back-asswards, right? Because he wasn't trying to hide his deck tech. He was actually trying to show you the superior tech, which is the tech of using dust to dust and not 2 cop reds. In his mind, that is the superior tech that he wanted to play with. So actually, he wasn't hiding deck tech. He was actually trying to give you the good stuff. Anyway, this seems incredibly dumb and bad on all sides. If Weissman didn't cheat, which we have to presume he didn't unless somebody can prove he did, he literally can't do anything to show or prove that exactly because of how poorly this event seemed to be handled to begin with. Exactly, you can't prove a negative. Why were there no deck lists required? Why were there no deck checks? And that's the other thing. They could have done deck checks all throughout the event, random deck checks just to check the integrity of a deck. They had nothing to check it against other than the last deck check, but that still might have been a way to mitigate this. If the submitted deck photos are not specified in the rules as being required and your effective deck registration, what is the point of them and why aren't they? Why aren't they required and why aren't they your deck registration? Well, they're not. They also didn't take photos of everyone's deck, just his, as far as I know, in the photo op. There may have been a couple of others, probably some of the finals players, but yeah. Guy says, I guess it's good on CFB for trying to fix things, but it sure as heck seems like they're at fault to begin with for causing the situation to begin with, and nothing they do will fix it in regards to how it ends up for Weissman. And this is exactly the problem here, right? Because a certain number, and honestly, who cares? A certain number of people in the world just aren't going to like you, and you just have to suck it up. But it really sucks that until this is corrected, he's got to sit here and eat it from public opinion from that group of people who feel that they're justified in being vocal, despite not being there, despite none of his opponents claiming he's cheated. These people want to sit at home on their keyboards and create a problem, and they were able to do it so well to put so much pressure on CFB potentially that CFB had no spine and buckled and just now is trying to just play cleanup. Or worse, CFB realizes how bad they screwed up here and they want a scapegoat. They want to make sure everyone's going after Brian, and we're focused on the controversy, and we're focused on what a cheater Brian Weissman is, which is something that you literally would never have ever expected to hear. If you knew anything, if you'd been around in Magic for any length of time, it's an absurd statement. But we'll run with it. They want to focus on that, perhaps because otherwise the focus shifts to why did they not do their jobs correctly? Why did they screw up? Why did they do this? This person says, the rules that were apparently in place, and from his statement, there seems to be no actual evidence that he cheated. That's a really shitty spot for him to be in. The CFB doing this to quote-unquote fix things for the tournament integrity or whatever doesn't actually address those underlying issues or clarify if Weissman did or did not cheat or how this will be handled in the future. Exactly. As long as they've got you focused on him, you're not going to focus on them, and that's where the focus should actually be, right? Because whether or not he did or didn't cheat, which based on no evidence at all, right? More importantly, what we do have is a situation where we know for a fact, incontrovertibly, they ran this tournament like crap. They completely did a disservice to everyone involved. And let's say that there was no photo controversy. Now let's say Brian finishes the event, goes 9-0, and then let's just say somebody wants to then claim that he cheated. It's very easy. Anyone could gin up the same controversy without the photo. It wouldn't matter. All they have to do is get enough people to just repeat a lie. If you repeat a lie enough, people start to believe it. And without deck lists, he could never prove that he didn't cheat. He can't prove it here. Nobody can. So, the onus is, of course, on someone to prove he did cheat. And a discrepancy between a photo op and a deck list isn't the issue. The only way you could prove he cheated is if he had a deck list in round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that differed from his deck list in a different round, and there's no claim of that or evidence of that. But anyway, the point is you could tarnish anyone's rep at any of these events by claiming they cheated. You just got to get enough people to repeat it and spread false information, and you could taint anyone's victory without a deck list. This is garbage tournament running by CFB, and they owe the man an apology, in my opinion. So let's see here. Guy says, speaking as an outsider to the series of events is nothing but paint the state of Magic social media as a toxic sludgefest. Clearly the precedent being set is to never contribute a deck list, an idea, post, or thought, because it'll be used against you at first chance. A lot of opportunists are chiming in to further their own clicks, their own likes, and their self-interest, right? Because if you can talk some crap on Twitter, you can get a lot of clicks and shares. Hey, that's what matters, right? Doesn't matter who you attack as long as you attack somebody so you can get likes and shares. A lot of finger pointing based on speculation and innuendo. Exactly. Nothing about this is a good look, even more so because the state of said quote-unquote cheat is ambiguous, so ambiguous and unprovable, right? So this person actually understands how justice works. You have to prove the cheat, not prove the innocence, right? Guy says the baseline's not hard to understand. CFB did a competitive tournament with no deck list required to enter. The guy posted a photo of a different deck list on Twitter before the event. He changed at least one card before or during the event and won. What people seem to forget, though, is that if he was playing, Elves, which must have been why I thought of saying that earlier. If he posted he was playing Elves or some ridiculous shit like that, pardon my language, ridiculous crap like that, no one bats an eye and he wins clean. But now that one card's different, everyone seems to think he did it just to win the finals, which there's no way to know. There's no way to know how many people did the exact same thing without getting caught just because they didn't win the entire thing. So what is the fix? Yes, make a tournament with required deck lists. No crap, right? No crap. So there's just a lot of reasonable people here, and there's a lot of garbage going on. But again, I bring it all back to a few simple things. He played a consistent deck for 9 rounds in the tournament. So what he did during a photo op doesn't actually matter. There are no claims by anyone that he ever tried to use the the dust to dust in the photo op in the tournament. He never did. If he misregistered, if they want, there was no deck registration. They're claiming that the photo taken in the middle of the tournament of just a handful of people constitutes a deck registration. Then they're claiming that based on that, he misregistered his deck. And then they're claiming that the penalty for that is disqualification from the entire tournament, when I've already shown you that that's not accurate either. So basically, CFB is in the wrong here for not registering decks. They're in the wrong for what the penalty is. They're in the wrong for changing the rules in the middle of the event. If we even allow them, if we allow them the courtesy to say, yeah, okay, I guess you decided to have people register in the middle of the event, didn't clearly explain it, completely changed the rules there, didn't apply the rules equally across the board to all players, but somehow we're going to go after this guy. Yeah, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. So, like I said in the beginning, I'm biased, obviously, towards my friend. And I'm very upset here. And I'm upset because of the very poor way this is handled. I'm upset because of the what I see as a guilty until proven innocent approach that was taken here. None of his opponents ever even said he cheated. You had a mob stirred up on Twitter, sitting at home on keyboard warriors, complaining. I think that's absolutely horrible that they would. I don't mind people submitting opinions from home. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But I think that they basically ran with those opinions rather than, doing what a judge is supposed to do and actually judging the situation correctly. I think that they've defamed or at least attacked the reputation of a man that I know and trust and have trusted. I would trust with my son. I would trust with my money. I would give him the PIN to my account. I would trust him with my life, man. I'm telling you, I don't know how else to express it. I'm in the military, right? Like the people that I work with and I have left and right of me in, combat zones, right? In that situation, I have to be able to trust those people or not trust them based on my judgment, right? I need to know who they are. I hope that I can trust them, but if I can't trust them, I got to make sure that I don't, because it could get me killed or it could get somebody else killed. And this is no hyperbole, right? It literally will cost lives, right? Potentially. And so one of the things that I think I start from is a position of earn my trust. I'll give you the opportunity to earn my trust, but you've got to earn it. And I'll constantly be watching for reasons not to trust you. So I'll constantly do things, even when I've known you for 25 years, I'm still going to go look and see, is there a picture of him playing dust to dust in the event, or did somebody say he played it in the event, right? So that's the kind of person that I am. And it's very critical that I get my judgment right of people's character, right? Of their trustworthiness, primarily. And I can tell you, man, I trust this guy as much as I trust my brothers and sisters in arms. I trust him that completely. But it does make me biased. So I've kind of explained what I see here and how I approach this, and I hope that this made sense. I'm interested in whatever your comments are, but I really do prefer that you approach this from the standard of, okay, I'm going to assume innocence and look for guilt. Because if you're approaching it from the standard of, I'm going to assume guilt and then try to prove innocence, you're coming at it completely backwards. And I'm just going to look. I'm going to disagree with you. But I'm not even going to bother, right? Because that means that your character, your personality is so wildly different from mine that we probably can't even have a conversation. Like anytime something happens, I always hope for the best and look for the worst, but I always start out hoping for the best. I always hope for the innocence. I always take it from that, and then I look to see if I can find the evidence, right? Every time, right? On the other hand, if there's a preponderance of evidence, right? Well, that's another story, and then I'm all about meting out some justice. If Brian cheated here, I love my brother, but If he cheated here, if he cheated, right, then he should get whatever the associated penalty is. However, at best, he misregistered his deck, from what I can tell. If he misregistered his deck, he should have got a game loss. They should have made him play with his preferred card, dust to dust. Ooh, what a punishment. But they should have done that. But neither of those things should even be in question in this format, because nobody complained about him using dust to dust ever. He just used it for a photo op. And CFB, you guys screwed up royally. You tainted your event. It didn't matter who won. It didn't matter if this was the case. If he won, it didn't matter if this came up or anything else came up. Any claims about cheating in your event are completely, you cannot prove innocence precisely because you didn't register deck lists. What in the hell were you doing, CFB? You owe a major apology to everyone at that tournament, because we don't know how many of the other players were being cheated by other people. We don't know how many switched their deck lists out. We don't know anything, and we don't know it because you didn't do your jobs. You failed. You failed the whole freaking Magic community. You failed the tournament. You failed the players, and you failed my best friend. And I will ensure, frankly, this is my response. If they make it right, they make it right. I could forgive them. But right now, they're not making it right. And until they make it right, I certainly will never spend money on anything that supports CFB again. And that sucks, because I tend to like their Magic content on YouTube. I've already unsubscribed from them for now. I tend to, I have a good friend of mine who is associated with the company, also fair disclosure, or at least he used to be a friend of mine. He was certainly a playtest partner for years, Luis Scott Vargas, a guy who I also trust. I don't know him personally, like in the way that I know Brian, but I've been around him. He's a great guy. He's a lot of fun. He's a great player, obviously. And I don't know. You think of a player that you like and respect, and imagine that somebody took something this nebulous and tried to pin a cheat on that player after they worked so hard for years to try to acquire a win. And you imagine how you would feel if that was your friend or your respected player. And, that's how I feel right now. But again, I've tried to look at this squarely. I've reached the conclusions I've reached, and now I'm interested in you. What do you think? What are your conclusions? And if you made it through this whole video, I have to say thank you so much for watching. Please do your best to, be open to, basically try to take this from, treat Brian the way you would want to be treated. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay? That's all I'm trying to say. And then think about it, and then look at the situation and tell me what you think, honestly. And if you reach a different conclusion and you come at it from a different way, well, that's cool. I want to hear it. That's all right. But just do me a favor and don't start from the position of he's guilty and he has to prove he didn't cheat. Because if you start there, you wouldn't want to be treated that way. I wouldn't want to be treated that way. Nobody should be treated that way, not ever. It's not the right way to handle things. And I'll have a real tough time listening to you if you start from that position or that perspective. Anyway, that's all I've got, folks. Thank you very much. I realize this was extremely long, but it's very important, I think. And thank you. I'll see you next time.